Last night, Yu Darvish's game got rained out, which means that if you use Yu Darvish in DFS, your pitcher scored 0 points. I wish I had used Yu Darvish in DFS last night because he actually outscored Kyle Gibson, who was my top pitcher last night. Kevin Gausman didn't do a whole lot better, so there's nowhere to go but up for today in MLB DFS from pitching perspective. The problem is, a lot of the pitchers on today's slate carry similar risks to the ones last night, where sure, they've got upside, but the floors are not good. I can't pinpoint anyone on this slate who has what I would deem to be a good floor for today. So we're going to dig on in, try to identify a guy who has an acceptable floor, but also a path to a good ceiling and see what we can cook up for today. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down today's 13-game main slate with locks set for 7:05 for tonight. There are a couple of rain notes here for today. There is a chance of rain in Buffalo for the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. It doesn't look as if it'll be a total wash. It's definitely worth checking back on later, but I am operating under the assumption that game will play as of right now. Rain is possible in Atlanta again today for the Padres and the Braves. That is one you'll have to check back on later. The doubleheader is scheduled for tomorrow as opposed to today. So maybe that was a choice on purpose. I'm not sure. Either way, check back on the rain for Atlanta and Buffalo tonight. It is 93 degrees today at Coors Field for the Rockies and the Mariners, and the winds are out to center at 10 miles per hour. Awesome conditions for hitters there. Upgrade hitters there. We will talk about the Rockies in the stacking section for tonight. We'll get into the pitching preview here in just 1 second, but first, make sure you tune in later on today to check out our MLB DFS Q&A. As always, that is at 4 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. No PGA portion for today because Brandon is on vacation, which also means I'll be flying solo for the PGA Heat Check later on today. That's at 10 a.m. on the FanDuel YouTube page and also up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. Make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page and also the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. We are on to game number 6 tonight, and the Taco Bell comeback bonus is still in play. Introducing the FanDuel Sportsbook and Taco Bell NBA Finals comeback bonus. The terms are simple. All you have to do is head to FanDuel Sportsbook before tip-off and place a $25+ pre-live moneyline bet on either team to win. If the team you bet on overcomes a halftime deficit to win, you will be eligible to win a $10 bonus in FanDuel site credit. You'll win your bet and you'll earn a bonus. That is more ways to win thanks to our friends at Taco Bell. Users must opt in to the promo in order to be eligible for the bonus payout. Eligible every NBA Finals game until the bonus hits. Must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Bonus issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max bonus $10. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate, Yu Darvish, again, the highest salary pitcher on the slate for today. He checks in at 11-2. A reminder once again, Darvish is coming off the IL. Probably about 85 or so pitches for Darvish tonight, if I had to guess. So he is the highest salary guy, but keep that in mind. Trevor Rogers is $10,000 on FanDuel. Luis Garcia is $9,600. Wade Miley is $93. Aaron Nola checks in at $9,100. And we have Alex Wood, Herman Marquez, Tarek Skubal, and John Means as the others at $8,000 or higher. When you hear that list, you can probably tell why there is some hesitance here, because Darvish, not really an option for me, given the concerns around his length, given the weather, given the matchup. Even with no Acuna, it's still a tough matchup. Garcia's facing Cleveland. They've been pretty good recently. Miley's not a big strikeout guy. There aren't a lot of clear, definitive answers here. So I feel okay going to Aaron Nola as my top option, despite the fact there's a lot of risk. If you're playing a cash game, I don't think Nola is your guy. I'll talk about someone else in a bit who you can go to there. But for tournaments, I am in on Nola here. He's facing the Yankees, and that's why I do not want him in cash. The game is in New York. He is on the road. He is facing a DH. There are a lot of reasons to be wary here of Aaron Nola. The upside, though, is likely unmatched. Nola has seen some movement change since the sticky stuff discussion began. It's not a lot, but a little bit. He has had a bit less vertical movement on his curveball over his past 6 starts. It has not had a negative impact in that time. He has a 36% strikeout rate with a 6% walk rate. And those strikeouts have come on the road too, which is a key for Nola because he typically has been a guy who I do bump down a decent amount when he's on the road versus when he is at home. In the 3 road starts in this time, Nola has a strikeout rate of 7% in one, then 55% and 32%. So it's volatile. He could get rocked like he did against San Francisco, but he also could strike out everyone like he did against the Mets. The Yankees are a team he did face near the beginning of the stretch. That was in Philly, so keep that in mind. But Nola had 9 strikeouts over 7 2/3 shutout innings. I am not expecting that again here, given that this game is on the road. But I think we can use pitchers against the Yankees. Shouldn't feel like tremendous about it, but I think we can. They have a 24% strikeout rate versus righties with a 95 WRC plus. I think it is totally fine to go here as long as you are in the right format, aka not a cash game, and you are okay with the risk. I am. He could be very similar to Gibson last night. Like, it's within Nola's range of outcomes to score negative points here, but because the upside is so high, because the salary is so low at $9,100, Nola is my top tournament pitcher of the night for tonight. As far as which pitcher I want to go to in cash games, I actually am okay saving some salary there and going down to Tarek Skubal. He is $8,200, and I don't mind that personally. He's had a really rough schedule recently, and things get a lot easier tonight against the Rangers, and I'm willing to use him as a result. The most relevant sample for Skubal is over his past 6 starts, because that's when the movement on his pitches has been lower. In those starts, here is the ranking of his opponents by WRC plus against lefties. They have ranked 1st, 20th, 22nd, 2nd, 1st, and 7th. The 2 softer matchups he had were against lower strikeout teams. So this is the first time in this stretch he gets a bad offense against lefties that is willing to strike out. The Rangers rank 25th in WRC plus versus lefties. Their strikeout rate is 24%. And Skubal is fine despite having that tough schedule. He had a 3.99 skill interactive ERA. His strikeout rate is 25%, and he had 9 strikeouts over 7 innings of 1-run ball against Houston, which is really tough to do. He had 6 strikeouts in both games against the White Sox. So the results were not always great. His ERA is over 4 in this time, but you also don't expect good results against those teams. He is at home here, which helps. So again, it's not a safe play. There are paths to failure for Skubal, but I don't think any real safe plays exist on this slate, so I'm fine taking a bit more risk and letting it ride here. I think that Skubal showed up well enough against tough opponents, and now he gets a softer opponent for tonight. So to me, Skubal does make a lot of sense. If I had to pick a pitcher for a cash game for tonight, Skubal would likely be that guy. Single entry tournament, I'll go Nola. For a cash game, give me Skubal, but Skubal does have tournament appeal as well because there is a path to a ceiling for him. Would rank him 2nd for tournaments behind Aaron Nola. Number 3 for me will be Trevor Rogers. Skubal is our value play for tonight, $8,200. Rogers is $10,000. That is $900 more than Nola, and I think his ceiling is lower than Nola's. That's why I'm ranking him behind both those guys, but I am still okay using Rogers here. He's facing the Nationals, and they're definitely a better team versus lefties and righties. They have a 111 WRC plus versus lefties, but they do strike out a bit, a 23% strikeout rate for the Nats versus lefties, which means we can use pitchers against them. Just know that there is some risk involved here. The upside should be there. It's not as high as Nola's. It's probably about on par with Skubal's at least, but not as high as Nola's. But it's there. Rogers still not going deep in games. They've got him on an innings limit, so I'm not expecting that to change, but he did go 99 and 96 pitches across his past 3 starts. So even if he's not going 8 innings, there is wiggle room with his pitch count. I think that's reassuring. And he should be good in the innings he's out there too, because Rogers has had a bit less sink on his 4-seamer across his past 7 starts. He still has a 3.55 skill interactive ERA with a 29% strikeout rate. His hard hit rate against is 31%. Now, some Marlins pitchers do have pretty extreme home road splits, and that's a concern here because Rogers is on the road, and it's a good hitting park, but Rogers, not one of those guys we should downgrade too much on the road. He actually has a slightly higher strikeout rate and a slightly better ERA on the road than at home. It's not bumping him up on the road, but I'm not going to abandon ship by any means either. I do want to make sure I am lower on him than I am on Nola and Skubal, but I will still use Rogers and rank him third here. So for tournaments, give me Nola 1, Skubal 2, Rogers 3. For cash games, I think that Tarek Skubal is the top option for today. Now, in ranking Nola and Skubal 1, 2, we've kind of got some salary flexibility here for our stacks. And I would like to use that by stacking the Jays against Gary Richards. Again, check back on the weather here for tonight because there are some question marks there. But if it's good to go, the Jays will be awesome. Richards has been one of the faces of the spin rate discussion ever since it started. He has obviously been struggling in this time. Things have been a bit better recently, but that's just the results. The peripherals for Richards have still been pretty rough, and he hasn't always been facing teams as good as the Toronto Blue Jays. The movement for Richards hit its low point 5 starts ago. In the 5 starts since, he has a 5.59 skill interactive ERA with just an 11% strikeout rate. His hard hit rate is 46%. The one thing he is doing well is limiting fly balls. Richards has allowed a 32% fly ball rate, so that's lower than he'd want, but the dingers will still come. He let up 3 home runs in one start. He let up 2 in another, and the Jays fully willing to supply their own long balls here. They lead the slate in both isolated slugging and WRC plus against the opposing pitcher's handedness. I think it makes a lot of sense to go right back to them here. And the Jays, to me, if we get the all clear on the weather, are the number 1 stack for today. I want to talk quickly about Lourdes Gurriel. Obviously, from a salary/spot in the order perspective, not a guy we turn to very often. And also, he hasn't been the highest upside guy versus righties. I think that latter part is changing. I tend to skip over Gurriel in stacking the Jays against a righty, but he's been better. If we look at just since June 1st, so arbitrary cutoff, but, whatever. Since June 1st, Gurriel has a 247 ISO versus righties. His fly ball rate is up to 37%. And given how quickly power stabilizes, I am more willing to buy into this than a lot of other stuff. We talked about this with Michael Conforto yesterday, where if a guy's hitting the ball really hard, that to me is more impactful than a lot of other stuff. And Gurriel hitting the ball pretty hard. So he's not a value. Obviously, at $3,300, batting 8th, that's not really the mesh that you want to have in terms of a hitter, but that could also allow him to go overlooked. So I'm not going to rank him above Teoscar Hernandez or Kevin Biggio. If we're talking about the non-elite studs here, obviously George Springer and Bo Bichette are pretty undersalaried too, but I would say if you are getting a lot of Jays stacks in there, I would try to squeeze in some Gurriel because things do appear to be trending up versus righties, and he's in a good spot for tonight. So for tournaments, try to get some in there at least to safeguard yourself in case the power binge continues. As for the number 2 stack, the Rockies are at home tonight facing a lefty and Marco Gonzalez, and weather is perfect, so do you want to stack the Rockies? Gonzalez is a good pitcher. He's just dealing with some injuries this year, not pitching all that well through them. And I feel okay using bats against him as a result. Gonzalez has had 2 separate stints on the IL this year. The first time he came back, and his velocity was up big time for the later part of the season. That was encouraging, but the results still weren't there. Then he got hurt again, came back off the IL a second time on July 3rd. The velocity, not quite as high as it was in his first return. And again, the results have not been there. Gonzalez actually let up 5 home runs in his 2 starts since returning. Overall, since he returned from this first stint on the IL, Gonzalez is letting up a 47% fly ball rate. His hard hit rate is high enough at 39%. Strikeout rate is 21%. Now he has to go to Coors Field. And the Rockies are a much better team versus lefties than righties. They rank 3rd in WOBA against lefties at home. I do want to look at WOBA when it comes to home road splits because we don't need to account for the park. It's the same park. So they rank 3rd in WOBA versus lefties at home. So when you put them in this exact scenario versus a lefty at home, they are a good offense. Gonzalez could get back to being a good pitcher. He's had 10 plus days off. Maybe that rest will help. And he's been a good pitcher in his past. I think that's still in there, but I'm okay stacking the Rockies here and seeing what happens. And it does help that, like, just from a player picking perspective, PPP, it is a lot easier to find guys you want to use against the lefty. Trevor Story, CJ Cron, Garrett Hampson. Hampson really shows his power versus lefties. Brendan Rodgers is pretty similar, where it's a small sample, but a 268 ISO for him versus lefties. So I think those four, Cron, Hampson, Story, Rodgers, are all going to be a great stacking combination for today for the Rockies, and they are a team I want to prioritize. Also, I should note that Rodgers and Hampson are both below $3,000, so not too hard to get them, even if you go Nola or potentially even with Rodgers for today. We were on the Reds last night, and it was a lot of fun. That game overall, a thrill to watch, and the Reds popped off even without Nick Castellanos for the most part. I want to do the same here and go back to them once again. This time, the Reds are facing Robert Stock. He made 2 starts in the big leagues earlier this year, one with the Cubs, one with the Mets, and they didn't go all that well. He had as many walks as strikeouts across those 2 starts. He has gotten more strikeouts in AAA, but the results were still not great. And I think a big part of that is Stock's batted ball data. His fly ball rate has been very high, both this time with the Cubs AAA team and with the Mets, and that's not what he has typically done during his career. So it could make you want to be skeptical here. But it's worth noting batted ball data does stabilize more quickly than other data. He has changed his pitch mix. He has a cutter this year, whereas he was more of a slider guy in the past. So I would not be shocked if the backwards movement in his batted ball data sticks around. I would not be shocked if the bad results continue for Stock here. The Reds, a powerful offense in a good park, and they showed the upsides of that last night. So I think we should go back to them here once again for today. One encouraging thing with Castellanos is that that he did get in a plate appearance last night. He made contact. Exit velocity was 94.5 miles per hour. So the wrist injury for Castellanos does not seem too bad, which means A, that he might play tonight, but also B, I tend to worry about wrist injuries, wrists, obliques, et cetera, but that seemed okay. Shoulders as well, but seemed like he was okay last night. So if Castellanos does play, I will feel comfortable using him for tonight, whereas a lot of guys with wrist injuries, I'm not super in. But I think with Castellanos, we might be okay for today. Let's move on to things to watch. I'm guessing the Astros will generate buzz tonight because they're the Astros and they're facing a team or a pitcher with a 5.47 ERA. I'm okay with them, but I'm also okay being lower on them than consensus. They're facing Tristan McKenzie. He looked good in his most recent start, and it's not just the results. It's because he had a lot of velo on his pitches. It seemed like he was throwing his curveball differently than he was in his first stint. He'd been in AAA for the previous month, basically a month and a half, and he got some strikeouts down there too. So I'm wondering if McKenzie being in AAA may have unlocked something, work with the pitching coaches, stuff like that. It's possible that he has figured something out. So I don't think the Astros are out of play. Definitely not. They're definitely in play for stacking. He lets up a lot of walks, a lot of fly balls, a lot of hard contact, but McKenzie might be improving. He doesn't let up a ton of balls in play to begin with, so I am okay being underweight on the Astros if that's what it comes to. I think they're fine, but I'm okay being underweight for today. The Red Sox are in a good spot tonight against Robert Hatch. I just didn't want to include them in stacks because the Jays were there. There's some potential weather there. Didn't want to burn 2 spots in a game that might be risky. But I think the Red Sox really do work for tonight. Hatch seems to do a good job of suppressing hard contact because he has very much outperformed his peripherals in AAA. And that tends to be the result of that a lot of times is just getting, weak contact. But Hatch will let up base runners. So if we get the all clear on weather here, I'd say the Red Sox are a very fun number 4 stack for today. And they're in the same tier for me as the Reds. Yeah, I would say it's like Blue Jays, Rockies, and then a tier down to Reds, Red Sox, but all 4 very fun options for today. Finally, I did want to touch on the Dodgers pitching situation for tonight. It looks like they're going to be calling up Josiah Gray and have him be the bulk pitcher for today. Maybe not the starter, but like the bulk guy. And Gray is pretty fun. He's gone 15 2/3 innings at AAA this year, so a very small sample, but 39% strikeout rate. His swing and strike rate is 16.6%. Gray does let up a lot of fly balls, but that is more acceptable when you let up fewer balls in play, which he seems to do. So I'm not going to stack the Giants here. I want to see what Gray does. could be pretty fun, but we'll see how things play out there. But overall, just did want to mention that despite the fact we don't need data on this guy, not someone I want to stack against out of the gate. Okay, that's things to watch. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls for tonight. And I always do a boring one and a fun one. The boring one is going to be boring. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. facing a guy who's really struggled since the sticky stuff discussion. Being real bull, but hey, my podcast, my rules. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the dinger pick for tonight. Also, it is Dinger Tuesday for today. Would note that. The fun one, a.k.a. not Vlad, a.k.a. not the guy with like 97 home runs so far this year, not Shohei Ohtani. The fun one for me is Brendan Rodgers. Obviously, Coors is kind of a cop-out, but salary under $3,000. 5 home runs so far this year. I think that Rodgers will get number 6 tonight. So the home run calls tonight, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Brendan Rodgers. Because it is Dinger Tuesday, make sure you tune in for the Q&A later on today. Get your home run picks in. We'll talk about those on the stream for today. 4 p.m. on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Swing by there. Also check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed for the PGA podcast later on today, talking about the 3M Open. I'm flying solo for a podcast about a golf tournament in Minnesota. Should be a lot of fun. Love that for sure. Make sure you hit up the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed or swing by YouTube at 10 a.m. today. If you have questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Hopefully pitching goes better today than it did last night. If it does, we'll talk to you tomorrow. If not, no promises. We'll see. Either way, this has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.